Have you ever wondered who you actually are? And how much of you is the true you? Is authentic? Is real? Because what most people think is their personality is often made up of different masks, personas, roles, and even deeper than that, whole subpersonalities that basically have taken over. And all of those were once formed out of trauma and conditioning and self-protection when we were too little to understand what was happening. So in this video, I'm gonna break down how these roles, masks, personas were formed and how to start working with them and how to become more authentic. Hi everyone, my name is Christine. I help people navigate difficult life transitions, trauma healing and transformation. And today I talk about trauma response, as in we developed certain roles within our family system, especially if that family system was dysfunctional, if there was an abusive, dysfunctional, or let's say narcissistic family system or caregivers, then there are certain masks and personas we all have, we all develop, how we present ourselves to the world. And then there are full-blown sub-personalities that can become a dominant personality in that sense. And even we ourselves confuse that personality with who we think we really are. But it's actually, let's say, an artificial subpersonality that has started probably between childhood and adolescence to protect ourselves as a survival strategy, and then has been built over time and solidified over time. And then we think we are that, but we're not. So how does this all work? I'm not claiming I know it all. I can only say what I've realized in my own healing journey. The roles, the masks, the personality or the subpersonality that I developed, and how I dealt with that, how I healed that, how I released that. Usually all these things, the masks, the personas, the subpersonalities, they were all once built for survival, as a coping mechanism for trauma and wounding, and to protect the most vulnerable parts of ourselves, which is, of course, the inner child, and most likely a very, very innocent, pure, very vulnerable part of ourselves. That was when the trauma happened, that was then exiled. I talked about this also in other videos. We exile that part, we split it off. It gets fragmented. And instead we develop these coping mechanisms, these defense mechanisms, the survival strategies. And in this video, it's about the coping mechanism or the survival strategy of these masks, personas, roles, and subpersonalities. That is not our true, authentic self. And the whole point, the whole goal of healing, of a healing journey, is to become whole, is to become authentic, is to become our true self. And that means that basically we heal, we reintegrate these exiled parts, we become whole, and then our soul can truly, truly embody within us. And there is no gap anymore between ourselves, our personality, and how we show ourselves to the world, and our true authentic self, and our soul shining through us. And it's very, very common when you had trauma that there is a huge gap. There is inauthenticity because of these roles and personas that we took on. And usually there is not just one, there are several, or there are even many, and there are layers and layers and layers around that very vulnerable core, protecting that core, which is that very pure, innocent inner child part of us. So as with everything else, it's very important to start somewhere and to start peeling off these layers. And depending on the level of trauma you had, you will not get to that part very quickly or easily. You will start to get through to the surface layer first, and then as the healing journey proceeds, you will then basically dig deeper and deeper and deeper until at some point you come to that very, 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 core self, core, pure, innocent inner child self. And in many cases, that was a pre-verbal part of ourselves in the first few years of life. And I talked about this already. It's, we forget about it. We're not aware of it. We just keep living our lives. And very, very often, all our coping mechanisms, trauma responses, masks, personas, roles, subpersonalities, with all their limiting beliefs and all the wounding and the trauma, they run the show. They direct our lives. And we wonder why it's so difficult, why life is so hard, why everything just, doesn't work out. And it's just not our true self, aligned with our soul, aligned with source, aligned with our true north that runs the show. Because if that were the case, everything would just flow. There would be a flow in life. Everything would just come to us easily and effortlessly. There wouldn't be much struggle. There wouldn't be, constant disappointments and challenges and losses and, whatever relationship problems or breakups or, whatever. Everything would just really align easily. So at some point we have to look at what roles we play, what masks we have put on to present ourselves to the world in a certain way, because we don't want the world to see what we think is somehow embarrassing or bad or negative about ourselves. We have to start peeling off these layers if we ever want to be healed and authentic and whole again. So very, very famous or common examples of some of these roles are the people pleaser or the nice guy, the rebel, the victim, the savior, the perpetrator. There are many more. But they are very common, and they usually, you start to build them in childhood and especially in adolescence. When we start to interact with the world, when we enter social situations and structures, there are peers, there are, first romantic relationships, there are teachers. We start to put ourselves out into the world, and we still carry that very frightened, scared, traumatized inner child within us. And then we have to interact with other people and the world in maybe difficult situations. So we will form protective roles. And it's all happening completely unbeknownst to us, completely unaware on the subconscious level. So for example, I was a very, very introvert, shy, timid child. I was very, very sensitive. I was very much in my own worlds, in my, escaping into fantasy worlds and magical worlds. And I was not very, I didn't really want to get out much. I had friends, and of course I was meeting them. I was in kindergarten and then school, like the normal stuff. But I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like the complete odd one out. I had looked around and my family and my friends, and I thought, I'm not like them. They're so different. I'm so different. Like, what am I doing here? And I couldn't talk to anyone, and I couldn't talk to anyone about how I felt. I couldn't talk about my emotions, my inner world, nothing. It was just not welcome. When I tried, I was shamed, I was ridiculed, I was laughed at. And I would have started, I think, at some point, and the first signs were there that I would have been started to be bullied in elementary school. And it was already, I was already not really safe at home. So I needed to be part of, like a social circle, or I needed friends. I needed to be accepted by my peers. And then I somehow understood that the way I was somehow not welcome, because the other kids, they could smell it too, that I was somehow different, weird, And that's another thing I'm going to talk about later, that when you feel like you don't belong, when you feel very different than your family or the friends around you, and you feel like the black sheep, which is another role, when you feel like the odd one out or the outsider, that is often for a very good reason. And I'm going to talk about that later. So I needed to find a way how they would like me and how they would accept me. So very, very early, I think I was 11 or 12, I started things like smoking my first cigarette or drinking my first alcohol. I started to have my first boyfriend. I mean, it was just a peck on the cheek or something. It was nothing like serious. But yeah, I was very, very young when I started to become like really cool and like really like hard and like rebellious. I became the rebel. And then when I was like 13, 14, it really started with drinking, smoking, boyfriends, going out. Very anti-authority figure. My teachers really didn't like me, and I didn't like them at all. Like I needed to become cool, basically, in order to belong to the cool kids, to have like the cool friends and the cool boyfriend and the groups around me, so that I would feel like I would belong. And it was vital. To me, it felt vital for my survival to be at least part of a group. And that group needed to be cool. I didn't want to be, part of the nerds or something. So I had to completely suppress how I really was, the very sensitive and vulnerable part of me, the very empathetic, big-hearted, kind child I once was. It was all gone. I started to become like quite angry and aggressive, rebellious, quite a bitch, quite mean, sarcastic, cynical, me making sarcastic jokes, most about myself, but also about others. Of course, gossiping about others. Like I started to develop this subpersonality of that, let's call her the rebellious teenager, that then, even when I was a grown-up, just persisted. Like my entire life, I was basically, even when I was already a grown-up woman in my 30s, I was still the domineering, or the dominant personality was still that rebellious teenager. And I didn't feel like a grown-up. I didn't want to take any responsibility. I was very anti everything. And I mean, there's a good thing to it, to be able to say no and like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. And I was just like that my whole adult life, basically. But it also causes problems, because you're always pushing against something. If you're against whatever, everything, and you don't want to take any responsibility, and I was chasing freedom and like adventure and all of that, but it all came from a place of woundedness and of being against something and pushing against something, and that alone makes it really, really hard to be in flow of life. And it was not really authentic, because I let that subpersonality of the rebellious, angry teenager run the show, and I wasn't really aware of it. And only much, much later, when I peeled off the layers and I did all the inner child healing, and only last year, because of the breakup I could get to that core, to that extreme vulnerable, extreme innocent, pure, very young inner child part of me, that teenager. Yeah, I think even that teenager self, that teenager subpersonalities, there were layers to it. Like the core of an onion, and then there's so many layers around it and around it and around it, and I need to peel them until I could get to that part, that very wounded, very frightened part, and I could reintegrate her into my core self, into my core conscious self. And usually the subpersonality is the hardest one to basically heal and release, because it has formed probably in childhood or in adolescence, and then has solidified over the years and over the decades, and we're not really aware of it. So this is one to really start examining yourself. Where could you have a full-blown subpersonality that runs the show and that comes out in trigger situations? Like if your default reaction whenever there is a trigger is, for example, you get aggressive and angry and defiant and rebellious and very like teenage-like, then you could have a subpersonality like I had, that angry, rebellious teenager. I mean, I guess there are many more. I think the nice guy, the people pleaser, the savior, the rescuer, all that can grow into one of these full-blown subpersonalities that can run the show, that can run your life, and your reactions and all the patterns, and that strongly influence also your relationships. And it's you, yes, it's a part of you, but it's probably mainly that kind of defense mechanism and survival strategy as personality that once helped you, but now it doesn't help you anymore. It probably even, makes your life really hard. So if that is the case, then become aware of your subpersonality, of your dominant subpersonality. That is basically the main actor on the stage. In my case, I was like cool, rebellious, and like angry, and I hated authority figures. I got into trouble with grown-ups and teachers and later bosses and stuff like that, and landlords, and so much trouble, so much problems. And I acted all cool, like, oh, fuck off, like, you can't tell me what to do. But deep down, I was scared to death. I was so scared of them. I was scared of, not just authority figures, but of people in general. I was scared of the entire world. That part in me, that innocent, pure, vulnerable inner child part that was at the core of everything, that was totally exiled. She was terrified, completely terrified of everyone and everything. So it made sense that I developed this rebellious, strong, cool teenage self. This, whatever, like I do whatever I want, and you can't tell me what to do. And you have other bodyguard selves or masks that help that dominant subpersonality to protect that inner child, that exiled inner child part of you, which could be, my bodyguards were anger and arrogance, for example, and superiority, like, I'm better than them, they're stupid, they're like this. And at the same time, I had a complete inferiority complex. So anyway, there is a ego inflation and a deflation, and usually the inflation happens, the superiority happens when there is a not natural, but because of wounding and trauma, there is a very, very huge lack of self-worth, self-confidence, and self-love. So you need to artificially inflate your ego with, I'm better than everyone, and stuff like that. But that's a little bit of a different topic. So I was just so scared of the world and of people, and especially authority figures, and I couldn't I didn't want to admit it to myself. So that subpersonality took over, and that fear and all of that was pushed down deep, 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 deep into, I don't know, the abyss of my consciousness, of my psyche, of my subconscious mind. And it took me decades to get to it and to heal it and to release it and to integrate then that wounded, pure inner child part. Okay, let's talk a little bit about masks and personas. So we put on a mask, how we present ourselves to the world in a certain way, because deep down we think the way we are not liked, we are not welcome, we are going to be attacked or criticized or shamed or rejected. So depending on your circumstances and your social environment and all that, you will probably have developed a certain mask, a certain persona, how you present yourself to the world. This is a very generalizing thing, but women often put on the mask of the very nice girl and smiling and pleasing and appeasing and kind and never showing any anger, never saying no. And because she was once taught or programmed that her anger and her defiance and all that is bad, is not welcome. And then maybe she gets positive reactions and validations from the people around her when she's nice all the time and she's pleasing and she does everything for everyone. That's another role, by the way. The martyr, it can become so bad that you become the martyr. You're self-sacrificial, that you completely neglect yourself and your own needs for the sake of everyone else. That's often, women are very much, in my generations, older generations are still taught like that, and neglecting themselves, their needs, in favor for their children and their spouses and their family and everyone else. And men, again, this is very general and a bit old school maybe, but I think it applies still. Men are very often taught that, their emotions are shameful, they shouldn't show emotions, so they push down their vulnerable part, their emotions. They put on a mask of being strong and cool and brave and whatever other flavors there are. And you just basically don't show a huge part of yourself to the world. So either you show it only to yourself when you're alone, then you can allow yourself to cry, for example, but never ever with anyone else, or you don't even show it to yourself. You've completely suppressed that part of you. You've completely denied that part of you. That, let's say, the angry one, the one that wants to say no, the one that wants to, is quote unquote selfish, wants to live her own life and not what other people expect of her. Or again, could be the sensitive part, the emotions, the feelings, the crying or whatever it could be, that you don't show that to the world at all, not even to yourself. Yeah, and all of that makes you very first not whole, but also inauthentic. I mean, it makes us really, really inauthentic when we present masks, ourselves only as a certain masks or persona to the world, and social media doesn't make that any better. It makes it really worse, because it's so easy that you present yourself a certain way to the world. Look at me, I'm so whatever, look at my life, I'm so cool. I mean, I've done it. In the early years, it was still just Facebook, but just uploading all my photos of the traveling and living that super cool lifestyle, and then being a scuba dive instructor in Thailand and having that certain lifestyle. And I showed it to the world, and I presented myself as this, super cool, adventurous, freedom-loving person. And I was that, but what I didn't show to the world was my fucked up self. The one that was completely, getting caught up in toxic relationships and the drinking and the smoking and being lonely and alone and feeling that no one ever loved me and crying myself to sleep, or, I did not show that to the world. So, don't compare yourself with people on social media or in general, because they probably don't show the true or full selves or the truth to the world. And it doesn't matter what other people do. It really, really doesn't. Don't compare yourself with others. Instead, choose to become authentic. Choose to become whole and authentic within yourself. Choose to look at yourself, at your patterns, at your roles, at your masks, at your personas. And that is how you start. That is how you start the healing journey, just by making a choice. Does that role still serve me? First of all, you need to even become aware if you have it. If you have developed a subpersonality, and which one? What masks and personas do you put on? When you go out, when you are with other people, or even maybe in front of yourself. That could be too, we often lie to ourselves. And become aware of that and choose then to change it. You can absolutely choose to change it. But you have to become aware of it, and you have to become very, very honest with yourself. Where do I have that? What do I do? How do I present myself to the world? Which one could it be? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the rebellious teenager? Is it the people pleaser? Which one is it? And that child in us, that traumatized, wounded inner child in us, thinks that how he is not welcome. No one is going to like me the way I am. I'm not good enough. I'm to this or not enough of that. And they will reject me. They will not like me. So I cannot show myself to the world. And very, very often in my case, it was like this. I didn't know anymore who I really was. And that becomes much, much more difficult when you, for example, were not mirrored as a child, as a young child, as a baby, as an infant by your parents, because maybe they were narcissists and they never saw you as a individual, as a human being in your own right. They just saw you as extension of themselves. So they just projected onto you what they wanted you to be there for them and to mirror them, and not the other way around. You were never mirrored in your beingness. And so you could never learn how to even be yourself and how to become your true self, because from the very beginning, you were projected onto and trained to be a false self that served them. So if you were never mirrored, how do you even know who you are? How do you even know what your authentic personality is, or your authentic parts, and what the false ones are, what the fake ones are, what the survival roles and strategies were? Like, this is really hard in the beginning to even start to understand. So you have to start somewhere. So start to look at your patterns, at your behaviors, at your roles within certain social situations and within certain relationships. And there are different roles with different people in different groups. We might present ourselves like this to this one person and like that to that other person. I mean, of course, there is also it's kind of normal that you're different with your partner at home than at work, right? But it can become very imbalanced. So briefly, what roles are there? There are certain roles within family systems, especially dysfunctional families, that are main roles. Just for example, there is the black sheep, or the scapegoat, or the odd one out, the outsider, the one that everyone projects their own shadows onto, that can never do anything right. And that one is mostly the one that later becomes the healer, the intergenerational trauma and code breaker, so to speak, because usually that one is the more aware one, the conscious one, the whatever you want to call them, the starseed, the light worker, the old soul. And that's a story for another video, but usually these souls choose consciously to incarnate in really low dense frequency families and bloodlines in order to yeah, in order to heal them from the inside out. Like in my case, I was, of course, the different one, the odd one out, the black sheep, the whatever. And I was told constantly from a young age, why are you not normal? Why are you not normal? Why can't you be normal? Why can't you be like everyone else? Why can't you live your life like everyone else? And I mean, this is very, very detrimental, of course, when you get to hear that since you were very young. But just know, if that is you, you are the one who was born with a bright light, with a higher consciousness, with a stronger connection maybe to your soul. And that soul is probably, yeah, maybe it's an old soul. Maybe it's a soul from elsewhere, from higher dimensions, from God knows where, you know. You have a certain higher awareness. And that's exactly why you chose to incarnate in really difficult circumstances and really dysfunctional families, because you're the only one who will take on that responsibility and that very difficult task of starting to heal that trauma, of starting to heal the intergenerational trauma, doing the ancestral healing, you know, all these things, because you don't do it only for yourself, you do it for everyone who came before you and for everyone who comes after you. This is huge. This alone is a topic for a different video, but this is like a very, very big thing. And if that is you, then just know, I understand how hard it is for you and how difficult. But this is something that on the soul level you probably chose for a good reason. And you are strong enough to do that. You have the power to do that. And you will do that. If you watch one of these videos, this video, I know that you are here for a reason. And that you have the power and the ability and the capacity to do that, even if you think you don't. You do. You are strong enough. So that just needs to be said. There are other roles, like the caretaker, the savior, the people pleaser. You know, you have to, from a very young age, you were trained to just smooth everything over, to make everyone feel okay. There could be also another role of being the mascot, the joker, making jokes to loosen up the very dense energy or atmosphere in the room. You always help people, you always do everything for others, and you neglect yourself and your own needs. You try to save everyone. Again, the savior, the rescuer, can go to the martyr role if it's really, really strong, that you just, it's everyone else but yourself. You completely neglect yourself. Again, the rebel, what I was. There's the golden child within narcissistic families. The one is the scapegoat. The other one is the golden child, where all the good stuff gets projected on, and the scapegoat, all the bad stuff gets projected on. And then if there are more than two children, sometimes there is the lost child or the forgotten child who is somehow no one cares and is ignored. Of course, you have the perpetrator, the one that is the perpetrator, who is maybe the angry one. In dysfunctional family systems, it's of course very often the father, can be the mother, maybe there is alcoholism or something, there is anger, there is rage, there's volatility. And then of course the others are the victim. Sometimes the father is a perpetrator and the mother is the victim and the martyr. And then the children are the black sheep, the golden child, the forgotten child, the people pleaser, the caretaker, the savior. It really depends, and you can be several of these roles, even within yourself, within the family, or with other people and other situations. It's not just like one that you have throughout. You can have parts of this and parts of this and parts of that in different situations and with different people. And then there you have, of course, and I'm not getting into a narcissistic parents or family system topic right now, but then there is triangulation. The narcissistic parents will triangulate the children. Like, there are power dynamics, there are hierarchies. They, set them off against one another. Yeah, it's really difficult. And I'm sorry if that's you. I'm sorry if you had to grow up like that. I really understand. And it's even more important to start the healing process if you ever want to have a more healthy, happy life. So what do you do about this? So whatever role, subpersonality, mask persona, whatever you have, the first step is to become aware. The first most important step is to shine the light of your awareness, of your consciousness on yourself, on your life, on all areas of life, in all your relationships and all your patterns. What role do you play? What mask do you put on? What persona? And what role do you have within your own family or friends or within your work area? Do you have a full-blown subpersonality? That is the dominating one that runs the show. Start to observe yourself, start to observe your patterns, start to observe your reactions, your thoughts, your emotions within all these different areas of life, within these different connections and relationships and social situations. That's the first step, and it's the hardest to get from the unconscious to the conscious, from the unaware to the aware. But this is what's needed to even change anything. You need to start to become aware and to observe yourself. So observe yourself, become aware, journal, meditate, do everything you can to start to become aware. And then write it down. You can, of course, get help and support and do your research to understand what the different roles are, what the different subpersonalities are. But the most important step is to become aware within yourself and your life. And know that you have the power to choose differently, even if it seems impossible, like I'm supposed to, be someone else because you think you're that. And just know that you do have the power to change that. You do have the power to choose differently. You do have the power to make the decision to exit all old roles, to discard all your masks, to release all these subpersonalities, all of that which is not serving you anymore. And you can connect with your heart, your soul, your spirit guides, with God, with the universe, whatever you want to call it. And you can ask for help. Please help me to become aware of what is not me, of what is not my authentic true self, and help me please to release them and to reconnect with my true core and with my true self. And just help me to see that and just make the choice. It's an internal decision, and there needs to be a willingness. And that includes being really, really honest with yourself, because this is not easy. It's not easy to look at it. It's not easy to admit to ourselves that we are fake here and inauthentic there and, whatever, people pleaser or something. It's really not easy. So just know that, and know that it's okay, and we all do it. Especially when we have lots of trauma, we will have lots of these roles, masks, personas, and so on. It's normal. It was our way to survive. But now, when you're watching this, you probably want a different way of living and being. So you can absolutely choose to become authentic from now on, and to heal these and release these masks and roles and so on. So when you catch yourself, you become aware, let's say, and then you catch yourself. You probably catch yourself way too late, when the situation is over, when you've already done it, you acted on it, you played your role, and that's totally normal, that's okay. The more you do that work, the earlier you will catch yourself. And then you can basically reprogram yourself. You can rewire yourself. And the number one healing tool, I say it over and over and I say it again, is inner child healing and reparenting. And I made another video about how to start that, because it sort of goes hand in hand, the inner child healing with reparenting, becoming your own inner loving parent, and with becoming aware of the inner critic. And the inner critic, there is of course a connection to the roles and the masks and so on that we play. And the inner critic is of course the inner critical voice inside our own head that says things like you're not enough, you're not good enough, no one could ever like you, like you cannot show yourself to the world like this, are you crazy? Like, look at you, you're ridiculous, no one likes you, no one could ever love you or respect you. So that's the inner critic that you need to become aware of too. And when you start inner child healing, start at the same time the reparenting, becoming a loving parent, to counter the inner critic, to say things like, no, you're loved exactly as you are. I love you exactly as you are. I see you. I'm right here with you. There's nothing wrong with you, and so on. And then the inner critic will become more and more obvious. And then you can choose to not listen to inner critic anymore. You say, okay, I hear you, but I still choose to be loving and compassionate towards myself from now on. And I choose to become authentic from now on, because I don't need these old protective roles and masks and personas anymore. And the inner child healing is tool number 1, because these masks, personas, and subpersonalities were most likely developed already in childhood, at the latest in adolescence. And when I say inner child healing, that includes the inner teenager. I'm going to make a separate video about that, but the root cause will most likely be in childhood. And then the inner teenager, or let's say the teenager that you once were, will probably have then fully stepped into that role and fully developed it. And you got to go to the root cause. And that's whatever trauma and wounding happened in your childhood, teenagehood, most likely childhood, where that stuff came up first, where it started, the origin, basically. So that's why the inner child healing is so important. And I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to talk about it in another video, but include the inner teenager. Because very, very likely, especially if you have a subpersonality like I had, the rebellious teenager, then it was truly developed and solidified in adolescence. But it was all for protecting the inner child. So it always comes back to that. It always comes back to that exiled inner child part that needs to be healed and reintegrated. So inner child healing, number 1 healing tool, and look at the inner critic and start the reparenting work. So the number 1 healing tool together with inner child healing is, of course, emotional healing. Because that's where it all started, right? Our trauma, our wounding happened, and we chose to push down our emotions, to avoid them, to suppress them, to deny them. And instead we develop these coping mechanisms, masks, personas, and so on. So it needs to go hand in hand, of course, emotional healing, inner child healing, and start to observe your own thoughts. As I said, especially the negative ones, the inner critic, identify the inner critic. How do you talk to yourself? How negatively do you talk to yourself? Where are your limiting beliefs? Things like, no one likes me. I'm not good enough. If I show myself as I truly am, then everyone will abandon me, and things like that. And start to reprogram yourself, start to rewire yourself, your thoughts. Choose from now on more loving and compassionate thoughts and more loving and compassionate self-talk. That's very, very important. And when you do that and you become the loving parent to your own inner child, then don't just say it like, oh, I love you and I love you exactly as you are and I'm right here with you and all your emotions are welcome. And the next time you are miserable, you're angry, you're ashamed, you're sad, you again, judge yourself for it and you let the inner critic take over. Oh, why am I like this? And this is so stupid and I'm stupid and I can't do anything right and I fail again and look at me. Then, of course, then it doesn't really help. You can do, inner child meditations and reparenting meditations, but if you do not apply it to real life, if you do not implement it the next time something happens and you feel bad and then there is a challenge and you reparent your inner child in real time, then it will not help very much. So it's very, very important to observe yourself and to truly apply it in a real life situation when there is a challenge, when you feel miserable or bad. It's easy to be nice to yourself and everything goes smoothly. When you're good, when you're successful, everything is amazing. But, when things fail, when there's, some challenging situations, then it's very, very easy to immediately judge ourselves and be mean to ourselves and fall back into our old patterns. So that's when it really counts. That's when you have to really catch yourself and choose differently and talk to yourself in a more positive way and choose more loving thoughts also. And about the family roles, like within the family system, the scapegoat and so on, you can absolutely choose to exit the family system, all the roles that you played within the family system. Things like family constellation is really helpful. Things like ancestral healing and healing intergenerational trauma is really helpful and kind of necessary when you grow or when you have grown up in a dysfunctional family. Otherwise, you wouldn't watch these videos because they're about trauma and wounding. So, yeah, you don't have to start with ancestral healing, but it's very good to know about it and at some point to start that. Because it didn't start with you, it didn't start with your parents. Maybe not even with your current parents. And then there's the collective trauma, of course, like wars and whatever, slavery and famines and inquisitions and all of that stuff that impacted deeply our ancestors, and they passed it on to us. It all plays into that trauma that you are at the receiving end. And it's all part of the healing journey at some point. And the last thing I want to say is if you are still physically in a very challenging situation within a dysfunctional family, an abusive family, then please, please, please remove yourself from that situation. You do not have to endure it. You do not have to tolerate abuse. You can choose, unless your child, don't think you would watch that video, but you can remove yourself from that situation. You can say no more. Going no contact is very scary for ourselves, that we are trained to just neglect our own needs and to play the game. But sometimes it's necessary. And I'm not saying you need to do that. You do whatever feels right for you. I'm just saying that sometimes no contact for a certain time can be very helpful, because you cannot start your healing process when you're still inside a dysfunctional situation, an environment where you are constantly in fight, flight, freeze mode or fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, when your nervous system is constantly dysregulated. It will not really work. You cannot really do proper healing work when you're still fully inside it. So you need to remove yourself from that situation and put yourself in a more healthy situation, in a more healthy living situation on your own or with more supportive people, maybe even move city or something. If you're already thinking about that or you've already done that, then congratulations. This is a really difficult step. I really understand it. I've done it myself. But sometimes it's just the only thing that is left, the last resort, because it's about you. It's about your life. It's about your healing journey. So do everything you can to choose yourself first and foremost. This is not selfish. Absolutely not. It's your responsibility. Your life, your well-being, your future, your happiness is your responsibility, no one else's. So you have to take the necessary steps in order to make sure that you are in a good situation where you can start your healing journey and when you can do it properly and when you feel safe. And the more you do that, the more you heal yourself, the more inner child healing, reparenting you do, the less the inner critic becomes, the more you start to become aware of your roles, masks, personas, subpersonalities, the more emotional healing you do, you integrate these old exiled parts, you feel the emotions, you release them fully, you become more whole within yourself. And therefore you become more authentic also, more and more. The more you release that, the more whole and authentic you become within yourself. And the more love and compassion you have with yourself and with others. And then things like forgiveness can naturally happen. You don't have to force anything. You don't have to force forgiveness towards people who were basically responsible for your wounding and your trauma. But at some point, it's very good. It's good to choose forgiveness, at least to start the process of forgiveness, because it makes things easier down the road. But don't rush into premature forgiveness. That's not good. If there is anger and rage and all of that, then it's very important to admit it to yourself and to feel it fully before you jump into forgiveness and it's all good and compassion. And it's forgiveness and compassion are a beautiful thing, but not prematurely. It's more important to feel authentic emotions like the anger and the fear and whatever else. And just choose love and compassion for yourself, forgiveness and patience with yourself in the process, because this is not easy and it's not a quick fix. So it takes time. And don't become, don't lose your hope or your motivation when things just take a while. That's very, very normal in that process. It's not like, it's not like, and it's all healed. And the more you do that, the easier these masks, personas, roles, they will just dissolve. They will naturally dissolve, and you will naturally become more authentic within yourself and more whole. And then you will be able to start attracting healthier relationships, better circumstances in life, more abundance. Things will become more aligned, and the universe will help you, will send you more aligned connections, situations, and circumstances in your life that help you to change your life for the better. But you just need to do the work. And you can do that right now. You can just choose, yes, I'm going to start no matter what. I want to become whole. I want to become authentic. And I want to align with my true self, with my core self. And just ask the universe for help. And it will start. It will set things in motion. So I hope this was a bit helpful for you. And if you like, let me know in the comments. If you discovered any subpersonalities, roles, masks, personas you have, let me know which ones. And you can just choose here and now to start releasing them and to start changing them and to start to become authentic. And it's a beautiful thing. And be proud of yourself. Be proud of yourself to do that work. It's not easy. So all my love for you, and I wish you all the best and have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.